The US just surrounded Venezuela with warships. Here's why. On September 2nd, 2025, a boat carrying 11 Venezuelans was hit by a missile in international waters. Everyone on board was killed. No Coast Guard interception, no arrest, no verification of cargo. Just a missile, most likely fired from an American MQ-9 Reaper drone. And then, silence. The US government said afterward that the boat was carrying drugs and that everyone on board were Tren de Aragua members. Maybe it's true, but blowing up a suspected narco vessel with a drone strike, rather than intercepting it the usual way, was something that had never happened before. And it was not an isolated incident. It was the first visible shot in something much larger that has been building quietly in the Caribbean for months. Right now, the United States has deployed more military assets to the waters just outside Venezuela than at any other point in the 21st century. 3 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, 1 Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruiser, at least 1 nuclear-powered attack submarine, the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, complete with an amphibious assault ship, transport vessels, Harrier attack aircraft, Osprey helicopters, hovercraft, and over 2,500 Marines ready for a beach assault. 10 F-35 fighters stationed in Puerto Rico. 9 vessels in total, collectively carrying dozens to hundreds of Tomahawk cruise missiles. The official reason given by the Trump administration is counter-narcotics operations, stopping the flow of drugs from Venezuela into the United States. The problem with that explanation is simple. Most drugs entering the US come through the Pacific coast or by air. None of the firepower assembled off Venezuela's shore can intercept those shipments. You do not deploy nuclear submarines and marine assault units to chase speedboats. To understand the present, you have to go back to the oil. Venezuela sits on the largest proven oil reserve on the planet, more than Saudi Arabia, more than anyone. In the 1970s, those reserves made Venezuela the wealthiest country per capita in Latin America. Oil money flooded in. The future looked limitless. But the money also created a system built entirely on one thing. And when the price of oil crashed from $40 a barrel in 1979 to just $10 by 1986, the entire structure collapsed with it. Inflation soared, debt spiraled. The government agreed to an IMF bailout that came loaded with austerity conditions, cuts, layoffs, price increases. The same government that had presided over decades of corrupt embezzlement, with an estimated $100 billion stolen between 1972 and 1977, was now asking ordinary Venezuelans to pay the bill. The rage that followed opened the door for Hugo Chavez. Chavez won the 1998 presidential election on an explicitly socialist platform. Oil wealth redistributed to the poor, an end to the old corrupt order, a new Venezuela. His early years genuinely reduced poverty, but the policies he put in place contained the seeds of catastrophe. He fired thousands of experienced oil workers after a 2002 strike, gutting the industry's technical expertise overnight. He nationalized foreign energy operations, pushing out Exxon, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, taking with them the investment and know-how that kept Venezuela's notoriously difficult heavy crude flowing. He shipped subsidized oil to Cuba, Nicaragua, and other allied states, draining reserves that the country needed. By the time Chavez died in 2013, Venezuela's debt had more than doubled, and oil production was already declining. His hand-picked successor, Nicolas Maduro, inherited the wreckage and then made it significantly worse. In 2014, the year after Maduro took over, global oil prices collapsed again, from over $100 a barrel to under $30 by early 2016. A country that had made oil 90% of its exports and up to 40% of its entire GDP had nothing left to absorb the blow. What followed was one of the most catastrophic economic collapses in modern history. Between 2014 and 2021, the Venezuelan economy shrank by roughly 3/4. Hyperinflation reached 130,000% by 2018. Basic goods disappeared. By late 2022, More than half the population was living in poverty. So what is actually happening here? And how did the US and Venezuela arrive at this point? Maduro's response to all of it was to consolidate power. He crushed protests, banned opposition candidates, stole elections, and by 2024 had become, by any honest measure, a full-blown dictator. Venezuela now ranks as one of the 3 most corrupt countries on earth, worse than Syria, worse than North Korea. Washington's attempts to remove him have failed at every turn. The first Trump administration imposed an avalanche of sanctions designed to strangle the Venezuelan oil industry and force Maduro out from within. U.S. companies were banned from purchasing Venezuelan oil. Spare parts and chemicals needed to maintain refineries were blocked. Venezuela lost access to the heavy-duty Gulf Coast refineries that had processed its crude for decades. Oil production collapsed to levels not seen since World War II. The sanctions worked on the economy. They did not work on Maduro. He absorbed the pain, crushed the opposition harder, and pivoted toward Russia, China, Cuba, and Iran to fill the void left by Washington. Cuba's intelligence services began advising his security apparatus. Russia supplied arms. China bought up what remained of Venezuela's dwindling oil exports. Iran collaborated on drone technology. Venezuela unveiled a Shahed 136-based kamikaze drone in 2024 that its engineers are still working to develop further. What was supposed to be economic pressure became, in practice, a slow-motion transfer of Venezuelan strategic alignment from Washington's orbit to its adversaries. Russia has since announced plans to build an ammunition factory in Venezuelan territory. Reports, unconfirmed but taken seriously, have circulated about the possibility of Russian hypersonic nuclear-capable missiles being installed there. Nearly 8 million Venezuelans fled the country, many of them heading north toward the United States border. Maduro pocketed the concessions, spent the period eliminating opposition candidates on treason charges, then claimed victory in the July 2024 election without releasing a single vote tally to support the claim. The opposition produced tally sheets from a majority of polling centers showing they had won by a landslide. The US, the EU, most of Latin America, Australia, Japan, and South Korea refused to recognize the result. Maduro had the protest leaders arrested and the opposition candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, driven into exile in Spain. Neither sanctions nor diplomacy had worked. Maduro was still there, and he was still getting harder to remove with every passing year. Enter the second Trump administration and a significant escalation in tactics. In July 2025, Trump signed a secret directive authorizing the U.S. military to use force against Latin American cartels designated as terrorist organizations. The Tren de Aragua gang, which operates extensively out of Venezuela, was on that list. So was a shadowy organization called the Cartel of the Suns, which the Trump administration claims is run directly by Maduro and his inner circle as a state-sponsored cocaine and fentanyl trafficking operation into the United States. It is worth noting the controversy here. A National Intelligence Council report declassified in May concluded that the Maduro government likely had no formal policy of cooperating with Tren de Aragua and did not direct its U.S. operations. Colombia's government and Mexico have both publicly stated they have found no verified link between Maduro and the Sinaloa cartel. Several of the countries that have designated the Cartel of the Suns as a terrorist organization, including the U.S., are the same ones seeking regime change in Caracas. But the designations are in place, the legal framework has been drafted, and the bounties tell you everything about where this is heading. The Monroe Doctrine, America's 200-year-old justification for keeping foreign powers out of the Western Hemisphere, was effectively being tested in real time. Biden tried the opposite approach: diplomatic engagement, eased sanctions, a negotiated agreement for Venezuela to hold a free and fair election in 2024 in exchange for relief. The forces assembled off Venezuela's coast are not sufficient for a full invasion. A full-scale operation to march on Caracas and arrest Maduro would require something closer to the 27,000 troops used in the 1989 Panama invasion, and Panama was a fraction of Venezuela's size and population. The 4,500 troops currently deployed on ships offshore fall well short of that threshold. But they are more than enough for something else entirely. Tomahawk cruise missiles can hit military command centers, infrastructure, oil production facilities, or specific high-value targets. F-35s operating from Puerto Rico can evade Venezuela's aging Russian-supplied S-300 air defense system. The Marine Expeditionary Unit is confirmed not for a full invasion, but for exactly the kind of surgical raid that Trump has used repeatedly. Syria in 2017, the ISIS leader in 2019, Soleimani in 2020, the Houthi campaign in 2025. The real play here may not be direct military action at all. It may be pressure designed to trigger something from the inside. A $50 million bounty sitting over a deeply unpopular dictator's head, combined with a fleet of warships visible on the horizon, is a message directed not just at Maduro, but at the Venezuelan military officers below him. Someone in that structure could do the math. Someone could decide the reward outweighs the risk. This is the Libya model. NATO air power providing cover for rebel forces on the ground, with a waiting replacement government already recognized by Washington. Edmundo Gonzalez, still in exile in Madrid, is still recognized by the United States as Venezuela's legitimate president. Whether any of this actually works is a different question. Aerial campaigns that were meant to trigger internal rebellions have a poor track record. Bombs falling on Iranian soil this year did not collapse the Iranian government. They hardened it. Removing Maduro without a plan for what follows risks producing the same chaos that followed Gaddafi's fall in Libya or Saddam's in Iraq, a vacuum rapidly filled by armed non-state actors. In this case, potentially the ELN from neighboring Colombia, which already has deep roots inside Venezuelan territory. The US and Venezuela have never been closer to direct military confrontation than they are right now. What started as an oil partnership deteriorated through corruption and ideology, and collapsed entirely through 2 decades of mutual escalation has arrived at a Caribbean standoff with nuclear-capable submarines, $50 million bounties, and drone strikes in international waters. The trigger has not been pulled yet, but the conditions for it have never been more carefully assembled. If this changed how you think about US foreign policy, make sure to subscribe to our channel. It helps more people find this video. And if you thought this was interesting, wait until you see this next.